Hey, everybody. Thank you for being here. Deborah Kobylt live. Have a great in-studio guest today, someone that I've known for a long time, Flint Dille. Flint, thanks for being here.
Oh, good to be here. Good to be here.
This is a man that I've known for a long time, and guess what? I'm not even quite sure how to introduce him. Let's just say that you are...
We've known each other for, what, 20 years now?
Yeah, a long time, right? Since
yeah.
preschool days. Not for our preschool days, but our kids, right?
Well, that's why I met you guys. It was at preschool orientation for
over at preschool.
Jordan and Zane.
Yeah, and we've been friends ever since, and you are so interesting, and you do so much. Currently, you are the creative lead over at a company called Niantic, which is a spinoff of Google.
That is correct.
And you are working on various projects that you will be telling us about. A little bit about Niantic. They worked on, you may have heard this, may not, Pokemon Go.
Yep, that was our second product. That was our first product after we left Google, and then Ingress is really the project I had a lot more to do with, which was our first product, and then we're coming out with Ingress Prime in the next couple months.
So much. So we're going to get to all that. You also work with the Department of Defense. Right, you do work with them, and you're going to tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah.
But you've done everything. I mean, you're the man behind shows like Transformer, American Tail. You've worked with Spielberg, board games, Dungeons and Dragons, video games, Diablo 3. You won a Story of the Year for Diablo 3. No, not Diablo 3.
Oh,
Chronicles of
Riddick.
Riddick.
Chronicles
Sorry,
of Riddick.
I'm getting your stuff confused, but you've done so much.
I've done a lot of games.
You've done a lot of games.
I've done like 60 video games.
You've done a lot. I mean, basically, you're in the...
lots that didn't ship. But,
you're in the business of transmedia, which basically you work across all platforms. And for people who know what that is, you know, everything from games, movies, TV shows, you do it all. But here's what I want to know, okay? You went to Berkeley. You studied ancient history and classic rhetoric. How do you go from that to developing games into, frankly, a field that didn't even exist when you were back in Berkeley?
Well, all right. Okay, that's a really interesting question. All right.
Yeah.
I mean, I went to college and I had no plan. You know, I
like a lot of kids.
I kind of snuck in on SATs and got there and just took classes that interested me and had no idea. I had no plan. And junior year, I got a letter that said, you know, you have to declare a major or we're going to eject you from the university.
Or you're out of Berkeley, buddy.
For the one and only time, I went down to the counseling center at Sproul Hall. And
I know where that is.
Met with a guy. Yeah, it's that main building right as you come on campus. And he looked at my classes and he said, well, you don't really have anything for anyone. How about ancient history and classical rhetoric? And I said, that's what
sounds good to me. And maybe I'll be a history teacher.
I'm in, so you're not going to throw me out? Good, I'm there. And that was it. And then I got out of college and had no prospects. But my parents had just moved out to California. And so one night I just asked my father. It tells you a lot that he never ventured an opinion before I asked him. I said, what do you think I ought to do anyway? I mean, I kind of not doing anything. And he said, well, I have a feeling whatever you do doesn't exist now. So you just have to prepare yourself for it. So that was kind of the
Well, you
orientation.
come from a very creative background.
Right.
Grandpa was what? Publisher to...
Yeah, he created a thing called Buck Rogers, which was
a thing called Buck Rogers.
In the 20s, and then was TV shows and stuff like that afterwards.
And we're going to get into that as well, because that's being...
I'm geek royalty.
Yeah. So, okay, from not knowing what to do, you're asking Dad, what do I do with this? Wait, then didn't you go to study
so I decided to get really serious about life and go to film school. So,
at USC?
I went to USC and got a master's.
Okay, and then what? So then you're graduating.
I'm going to make an intelligent career decision now.
You had 2 degrees under your belt, and then you're probably thinking, okay.
And I figured if worse came to worse, I could be a teacher or something like that, which I do now sometimes, but...
But then you got into writing for TV shows, right? I mean, you had to go do something.
Well, the first person that hired me, okay, you go to film school, and this is like late 70s, early 80s, and it's like I'm going to do important dramas and thrillers and all that. And the first guy that hired me was a guy named Joe Ruby, who created Scooby Doo.
Oh, cool!
And he wrote me to write Saturday morning cartoons, and I thought, oh, this is kind of cool.
Yeah, it runs in the blood, right?
Yeah, it runs in the blood.
Yeah.
I
could do that.
I mean, I wasn't really an animation person. I mean, there are people that just really decided to get into animation. I wasn't like that, but I started doing it. I was doing it for a few months and really liked it, and I was working with a really amazing team of people, and And so started writing cartoons and kept doing that for the 80s. And then I met a guy named Gary Gygax who you either know who he is or you don't, but he is the guy who created Dungeons and Dragons. He's a genius. He changed our world. And
tell us what that is for people who don't know. And I know that's a big deal.
Dungeons and Dragons is the first role-playing game.
I see.
And a role-playing game is the first official role-playing game with rules, not like a psychiatric role-playing game. And and it was just a whole new way of gaming. Always before that, a game had been you look down at a board and you move things around like Monopoly or chess or something like that. And this all really happened in your mind, but you play with a bunch of different people and you go on an adventure together.
So when you say you play with different people, you're saying on the computer?
Like,
at that time, it was on the
we're
computer,
sitting in a room
right?
now here. It wouldn't be look unlike a Dungeon and Dragon game. There are 5 people in the room, and we're all playing characters, but it's not competitive. It's cooperative.
Right.
And one person's a dungeon master, and they're kind of the storyteller and referee, and then the players are trying to figure out how to get through. The obvious thing would be a dungeon. You can do a lot of different genres.
I mean, it's a game.
Yeah, it's a game, but I mean, you're playing it, and it's almost all in your head. I mean, you have dice, and you can use them, and some people use miniatures, but in theory, you can do it with nothing. Mm-hmm. And everybody in the room has to see the same vision and have the same idea of what they're doing, and pretty much but underneath it, like when you sell Dungeon and Dragon books, it's basically stats tables and numbers. In other words, a massive mathematics exercise. And so underneath it is logic, but the whole thing is to just have a good adventure and tell stories.
So as you're developing this, right, Dungeons and Dragons, are you thinking to yourself, there's something to this. There's going to be more of these kind of games.
It was already out. I didn't help create Dungeons and Dragons. I met Gary, after when I met Gary, it was kind of a phenomenon. It was the early 80s. And so I was just learning how to do that and how to design miniatures games and all that. But like somebody like me, I couldn't have really made a living doing that. So I was doing the TV shows. Right. Which I enjoyed that. So I was showrunner on G.I. Joe and Transformers while I was writing books with Gary, and he had a mansion up in Beverly Hills, and so we go up and work up there, and then during the day, I'd
beats
go
an
do
office
the
job. Right?
Oh, it's fabulous. I mean, we had this converted stable. It's the best office I'll ever have.
I believe that.
It was great.
But again, from that, you morph into video game writing, right?
Right.
I mean, do you see like the whole arc to this?
Well, it's a logical
with
progression.
Exactly.
There was a screenwriter projection because. Transmedia, because I never really cared what medium I was working in. I always looked at it as being the same thing. And there are people that, I'd say a lot of writers come in 2 forms. They come in, there is a person who sees a specific story, and the whole exercise is about telling that story.
Right.
And those guys are probably the best actual writers. I'm not like that. What I am is I'm somebody that sees sort of a whole world, and I kind of like all these characters, and I don't really care whether I'm making a game out of them or a movie out of them or whether they're toys or what. I don't really care. It's just all the same thing.
But when you were doing this, did you ever envision, like look at the interactive games that are going on now? Like, I mean, come on, with Pokemon Go, as you said yourself, when that was first developed, you were on a tennis court with someone we both know quite well.
That would be Deborah's husband.
That would be my husband. You were playing
her
tennis.
Husband,
and
full disclosure, Deborah's husband's my tennis partner for 20 years.
Right. And my kid was in Boston, running around Boston playing Pokemon Go, and in which case it just sort of changed how everything was done, a game like that, right? I mean, there was a whole progression to it. But
yeah, and I had nothing to do with creating Pokemon
right,
or
we know
anything,
that.
But quite a bit to do with geo gaming. I'd worked for the intelligence community doing geo games for spies before that. It's like a real spy game, but you had real spies playing. And that was really cool, but we used a lot of the geo stuff. It wasn't nearly as sophisticated as what we were doing later at Google. But what was interesting about it is everybody else thought it was going to be virtual reality, and we were into augmented reality, which is layering a world on top of the maps. Like when you play Pokemon Go, it's really just a geo map.
Right.
Our project lead's the guy that created Google Maps and Google Earth.
And you were working for Google at the time.
I was working for Google, and then when they turned into Alphabet around that period, they spun us out, which basically means booted us.
You were booted, and then you began working for Niantic.
Right. We were called Niantic inside of Google, but because Niantic, we just thought it was kind of fun. We needed a name for our project, and we found out about this sunken ship in San Francisco. And there's a ship buried under the streets of San Francisco called the Niantic.
I didn't know this.
Yeah, and well, what happened was all these guys would sail into San Francisco for the gold rush, but you couldn't get a crew to leave. So they just parked the ships there, and they used them as stores. It was a bordello at one point. And then when they were all rotting, they just filled it in, and it's right under the base of the Transamerica Pyramid. We thought,
I did not know this.
A sunken ship in the middle of a city. We're naming our company after that.
What a cool name for the company,
Yeah, I know.
Niantic.
That's just too cool.
What have you developed under Niantic?
Well, we have two products. We had Ingress, which was a game that was our first game, and I really
huge
worked a lot
success.
on it. Still am working.
Yeah.
I mean, Ingress has tens of millions of players, and yet nobody knows about it, which is the modern world. I mean, that's the weird thing about games is you can have triple platinum game, and 5 guys on your Facebook page know about it. But
I know that you were even involved with it.
Pokemon
right?
was the first project I was ever in any way remotely involved with, where everybody in my life knew about it. And that's just the modern world. I mean, billions of people know about that.
Right. You go to a party and like, he's the guy.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah.
And they're like, oh, hello, nice to meet you.
That would have been great in my 20s. It doesn't do much for me now.
It doesn't do anything now.
But nevertheless,
maybe for the kids.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Oh, my
dad.
Well,
that was one of the few moments. Yeah, Gwenna actually thought I was cool for
You're
about
his
30
daughter,
seconds
Gwenna.
when it came out in the cast of her favorite show, which was Teen Wolf, broke to go play Pokemon Go. She said, "Oh, Dad worked on something that's cool."
Wow.
Doesn't make him cool, but he worked on something that's cool.
So currently, you're also working on another show. You're also working on Harry Potter. Isn't that
Harry Potter's the next project from Niantic. I can't say anything specific about it.
Why?
But
are we going to be able to get on a broom and go flying around?
Anything.
Can it be so interactive where we can get on one of those brooms and go flying around?
Hopefully you will feel like you've been on a broom and flown around.
That is so cool.
I'm not saying you get on a broom and flying around. There's no press release here. Hopefully you will feel like you are a magician.
Okay. How does your mind work to develop and write something like that? Because I know you're a guy who's up in the middle of the night thinking about these things and concepts. And how does your mind work to create stuff like that?
It all starts out. I mean, it all starts out where you have to, if you're advising somebody coming in, because none of this stuff existed
right
when I was coming in. But all the framework was there. I mean, role-playing games are played, and most, any kind of war game or military simulation, or most games, period, are played on some kind of a map. And you know what I mean? So all that's really different is that's a map that happens to be the real world. You're walking around and you just turn the world into a board game. And you sort of just have to think of the world in a slightly different way. And so does that. And then, for film school, it was really studying storytelling. That's what that is, and so it's superimposing a narrative onto the world.
Map.
Yeah, but you do that. We all do that every day. Just not everybody puts it in a box or downloads.
Yeah, and it's not quite as interactive. I mean, games are interactive. Think of the game Clue or Life, or but Clue. I love that game.
Yeah, Clue is totally interactive. And I'd love to see a role-playing version of Clue where you actually are Professor Plum. And you're walking around.
Gotta love Professor Plum.
You're maybe you're guilty and you're trying to hide it. I mean,
this is your next big thing. I hope I get a little credit for this one.
And then you want to play it in the real world. You rent out some mansion, and it's. I was trying to figure. Went to a winery that was a really great environment. I was trying to figure out how you have wine tasting murder games. I haven't quite worked all the way through this. But
is this how you think? Wine tasting murder
games?
This
is absolutely what I think.
But basically, if you think about it, that was interactive back in the day, and it's just sort of morphed into something more.
Yeah, no, I think we're heading into a really exciting time. I mean, I kind of wish I was just sort of starting out now with the tools that are now here. That there are all these things, and like, anybody watching, if you haven't been to an escape room, you ought to go to an escape room. They're kind of cool.
Okay, tell people
an escape
what
room,
and why.
A typical escape room is you're put in a room that's filled with a bunch of puzzles, and you have to figure out how to get out in an hour.
Oh.
Okay, you have to figure out how to escape the room, but in order to escape the room, you have to solve all the puzzles. But I've been to them where you have secret walls and secret doors, and bookshelves swing out of the way, and a new room is revealed, and they're really cool.
Yeah, what if you can't figure out the puzzle? That's intimidating to me.
The best of okay, all right, you are right, and this is an early medium. The first escape room I went to was a bunch of Mensa members and just intellectual mutants, and it was really not a lot of fun for me. I mean, I was trying to think of it as a narrative,
right?
And it was about solving the puzzles and all that. So I felt like a dumbiness walking around, but nevertheless, I just this. Totally
I love your language, the dumbiness.
Yeah, right.
There's Flintisms all over the place.
Yeah.
You've been in my living room, and I'm thinking, what? You've got your own little vocabulary. Dumbiness is one of them. You've got a. But I mean, that was very, very good. I like that.
Yeah, no, I was, I just, because everybody in the room's a genius. But
I'm going to use that word later. I feel like a dumbiness.
Yeah, right.
Around you, I feel like a dumbiness. Anyway, all right. So continue. We're back in the escape room.
Yeah, no. So I'm at the escape room, and everybody belongs to Mensa, and they've all done 50 of these.
So you and Sharon Stone.
Nevertheless, it was really. I mean, Sharon Stone. She wasn't there. There would be a really great Basic Instinct escape room to do.
There you go.
But anyway. No, Sharon wasn't there, but nevertheless, I saw what was really intriguing about it, and some of them are less puzzly and less geniusy, and there are other kinds of things you figure out, or sometimes you just walk around the room and you say something's wrong with that. I mean, I found this bookshelf. I just looked at it and knew something was wrong with it. I finally found the hinge and the lock, and somebody else had already found the key, and we opened it up and it revealed a whole new room, and this was fun.
Just sitting across from you, I just feel dumb. I mean, you are, because I know that you must sit in a room like that and go 10 or 20 steps ahead, like playing chess, right? Like Bobby Fischer playing chess.
Remember, I solved almost none of the puzzles in the first escape room I did. Because a lot of it's not an issue of being smart. You just have to know what you're doing, and also walk in there knowing everybody else knows what they're doing and you don't. Like when I'm working with DARPA, I mean, everybody else has got multiple PhDs and
hang on, DARPA. Let's explain what is DARPA for people who don't know.
Defense Advanced Projects Research Agency.
Okay, how did you end up working with the Defense Department? What did they play one of your games and go, we got to get this guy?
The first time I ever did anything with the military was it was literally a board game, and it started out. This is in 1990. It started out we were doing a Mideast conflict game. It was kind of a war game. We had the rights to the Tom Clancy games, but that was expiring, so we wanted to do something like that. And I was really interested in the idea of doing a diplomatic game where you're playing, but none of the other players know what anybody else's objective is. It's just like the Middle East. You don't really know what the Syrians want. You don't really know.
And they don't know what we want.
And they don't know what we want. And so you have to guess what the other guy's victory conditions are to win. I thought that was a really cool idea. And in the middle of that, and that's fairly esoteric, and not everybody shared their enthusiasm for that idea. But in the middle of the whole thing, Saddam Hussein rolled into Kuwait. And that began the run up to the first Gulf War. And so I decided, we can sell it. And remember, George Bush Sr. put a deadline on it. So I figured out we could sell it. And I could kind of rush it into real production as opposed to being just something we were messing around with.
So you sold this game based on war.
Well, at that point, my family owned a company called TSR that did the games. And
helps.
So what happened was... that helps. And what happened was sort of, but so we had to get it up at January 15th because that was the deadline that Bush had put Hussein on. So we knew we had to ship, or the game was pointless. And so what happened is we then started simulating what the conflict would be like.
Right.
And what was funny about it, it's really kind of a long, boring story, but what was funny about it was that in play testing we realized it's really not fun. If you're the Americans, you can just sort of stand there and just bomb the Iraqis for endless number of turns and just degrade them, and then they can't respond. We didn't know at that point about JDAMs, and we didn't really know what cruise missiles could do. We didn't know about stealth fighters, but we got the idea that we could you could suppress the Iraqis' air force very quickly, and then you could sit around and bomb them.
I got it. But from that, how did you develop a game?
So we issued. Well, we had a set of rules, and there were a lot of rules and protocols for the actual playing of the game. But anyway, so what happened is when we shipped the game, we shipped it with 2 sets of rules, and one set of rules was the realistic rules, and that way, if you're the Americans, you can just sit there and bomb the Iraqis, but it's no fun. Then we had the playable rules that made it so that people could play. Okay, it would play and it would be a fun game, and the Iraqi could actually win. Well, the guys at the Air War College, tested all the games that people and simulations people did, and they thought it was really funny that we had a set of rules that prevented the player from doing what was exactly their strategy. In other words,
I
they thought it
understand.
was amusing that a bunch of bozos were playtesting a game and figured out exactly how we're going to fight that war.
So from this game, the Defense Department calls you and says,
they had us
we
go
need
over
you?
there, and they said, you know, we really like your game, and you know, one of the guys there, Matt Caffrey, you know, knew me from other places, or knew of me anyway, and just said, hey, you got to come to this conference called Connections. And I went to that. It was with the Air Force. It was at the Air War College in Montgomery. It's like the grad school for the Air Force, I think. And so they had us come out there. I went out there with Ed Neumeyer, who wrote RoboCop and Starship Troopers. They had us come out there because they just wanted to talk to people that weren't sitting inside the military all the time.
Right.
And that started a chain of events. You know.
So what do you do for them now? I mean,
oh,
that
now
you could
I'm
tell
working
me.
with DARPA. We're doing something. No, there's nothing secret about this. But as a matter of fact, we're trying to tell everybody about it, and we're debuting it at DARPA 60. It's called Polyplexus. And what we want to do...
How do you keep this stuff straight? I mean, I'm just even trying to keep up with you in a conversation.
Well, sorry, is this... it's
a little inside, but I'm doing my best.
Yeah, no,
right?
no, it's...
I'm getting there.
It's basically, what DARPA's job is to research and develop. They work for the Pentagon, but I've never been on a project that was about killing people, because that's not... Killing people is really not the best way to win a war. The best way to win a war is you don't fight the war. And you don't fight the war because the enemy finds the possibility of you so uncertain and so horrifying that they don't get in a war with you. That's how you win a war.
Right.
Okay? You know, and DARPA was founded... It's kind of cool. It's worth 2 seconds. This isn't what you usually talk about on your show.
Not really. Somehow we derailed into war,
right.
but if you can kind of make it brief, like what do you do?
Okay, here's I can explain it this way. They were started when the Soviet Union came out with Sputnik in the 50s. Okay, and Sputnik was, all of a sudden we looked up and there was a satellite going over the Earth, and we had no idea where it came from. We didn't know they were doing it. And I think it was Eisenhower and, oddly enough, Lyndon Johnson, who decided this is never going to happen again. We're never going to be blindsided again.
Right.
So one of the first things DARPA invented was the Internet. The Internet was originally called Arpanet. And their whole thing is to think out ahead of everything else. So
when was this that they originally...
1959.
Right, okay.
Or 1958, I guess.
And it was a whole room, right? Back then, the Internet was like this big, giant room, wasn't it?
Oh, no, the Internet was at UCLA.
Yeah. Okay,
where your previous guest is a doctor, and Stanford. And they sent out a message, and the anniversary of it's actually coming up. They sent their first message, I think, was LO. They were trying to type hello, but it was a typo, so it was LO.
Well, it is the government after all,
yeah,
so of course they're going to say hello.
Yeah, right. So that was the first thing. No, they didn't think you'd be streaming movies and people would be watching illicit material and all that.
That's actually very interesting. So the very first message out from the U.S. government on the Internet was supposed to be hello, and it ended up
Now, some geek out there can probably correct me, but I think it was LO.
And very interesting.
Yeah.
So here we are.
It's not that boring, even though it's old stuff.
I don't think it's boring at all.
So now it's 60
frankly,
years
it's fascinating.
later.
It's so 60 years later.
It's 60 years later, and what they're trying to do is they're trying to speed up. They're trying to get better proposals, and they're trying to speed up science and research, because the only strategic advantage America has. We have one. I mean, there are more engineers in China than there are undergraduates in the U.S. Okay. And our strategic advantage is we're really good at inventing things. Americans are just really good at that. And so we want to speed up research, speed up development, and that means networking people that aren't usually talking to each other.
I understand.
And we're kind of
That's
doing
where you
a
would come in.
gamified network. Yeah, and it's gamified, and it's kind of a social game, and you get points, and you have, which is what I would do with the educational system if I could. Nobody's asked me to do that, and you get all sorts of people who maybe like really brilliant, but they're sitting in some obscure place, and they don't work for a defense contractor, and they're not at a major university, and they're working with the real guys. And the real guys may not get to talk about this stuff. Stuff really interests them, but they don't get to talk about it. So we're trying to get them to all together, give them challenges, feed them the freshest edge science you can, and hopefully they find connections and they invent the future. That's the goal of this project.
I understand, but I like what you said earlier. The real way to win a war is really not to fight it at all.
Well, that's yeah. I mean, that was Sun Tzu. That's like, you know, the art of war, you know, written thousands of years ago, and it was true then, and it's true now, and everybody will tell you that. You know, fighting wars is an expensive, painful, deadly, horrifying exercise. If you can avoid fighting a war, you know, like the Cold War is a perfect example. You know, if you can avoid fighting a war, that's the big win for everybody.
I think we need more female politicians, and let's see how we do then. Because don't you think,
No,
by our nature,
that was Mikhail Gorbachev and Ronald Reagan. I mean, they weren't female politicians, but anyway, Margaret Thatcher helped. No, Thatcher was
because I think at our nature, we're not people who generally want to go into a war and obliterate.
Nobody wants to go to a war. I have never
nations.
met anybody working at the Pentagon or in a military organization that really had a lot of enthusiasm about actually fighting.
I believe
a war.
that. I believe
it's
that.
It's usually civilians and people that don't have to deal with the consequences of it.
I believe that. That's very true. Let's get back to the work that you do, though. So that's
really
with
DARPA.
No, that's with DARPA. But let's go a little bit into your background.
We want to talk about talking mouse movies. We'll talk about that now.
Talking what?
Talking mouse movies. So we'll just shift topics.
Mouse movies?
Yeah. Well, when I was I mean that, you know, because I was writing movies, you know, at the same time, and I really wrote talking mouse movies.
Oh, I didn't know about that. So tell me about that.
That was Fievel Goes West. That was the Spielberg movie.
Okay, I don't know all of them.
There's so many.
How am I supposed to know each one of them?
Before that, yeah.
How was he to work with?
Oh, he's great. I mean, he's exactly what you want him to be. I mean, he's a genius. You know, he's probably the best filmmaker there ever was. I mean, people could argue that, but you know, and nobody has had that kind of a track record over that many kind of decades and that many genres. He's great. I mean, he's great.
Of all that you've done animated work, you've done TV, videos, film, you've written scripts. Is there one that you prefer, or it just all sort of blends? That's the career of someone who works in transmedia.
Yeah, it all kind of blends. It depends on, you know, whatever the day is. And I love all that stuff. Yeah, I mean, John and I, Deborah's husband, we're talking one day, and I was saying, you know, it really, if I had a superpower, it's just I can find almost anything interesting.
But is your mind
that's
going
not really a good thing, but
I think it's a great thing. I'm the same way. I find very much interesting. I'm interested in medical issues. I'm interested in what's going on politically. I think it's a great thing. But is your mind working all day on how to design something like this or what to write on? Because I don't think a creative mind can be turned off.
No,
it's just always in motion.
It can't be turned off. I've never had anybody else's mind. You know, so I don't really know how it's different.
That's a good one.
But it's true. You know, so I don't know how it's different. But yeah, I mean, and you work yourself into a corner in one project, but then the other one, you have an idea, so you work on that for a while.
Right, and then you put it over here, and then you've got another idea here.
It all because here's the thing. To me, it all just becomes the same thing after a while. I mean, you know, when you're designing games, you have exact same problems the Pentagon is having and everybody else is having. It's all the same thing.
Let's talk briefly about Buck Rogers.
Yeah,
Now
we're going back.
We're going back, but also going forward. Are you doing any work with Buck Rogers?
Okay.
Briefly.
All right. Buck Rogers is the subject of a number of lawsuits and litigation and all that stuff.
Did I have to step into that one?
Well, it's kind of interesting at the moment. I am a beneficiary in a trust, which means you have to think of me as being an infirm person or a child, which is kind of true. But I mean, you know, it's that's what a beneficiary in a trust is. You have no power, but you have no responsibility, but you're supposed to benefit. And right now, it's in the middle of a big mess, but I think we can see our way out of it now. And I would love to go do something with it.
Right, but you grew up with this,
yes.
You know, this pedigree, if you will.
Yes.
That your dad was the
publisher.
And
I feel like I want to go do something good with it. Before,
there's no doubt, because this is
game over.
Yeah, and you will. What would you like to do with it?
Well, I mean, I've done a ton of stuff. I've done a lot of games. We've concepted a lot of films. There's stuff now that there's just a lot you can do with it. And what was cool about Buck Rogers is everything was supposed to be scientifically plausible, and the stuff in it stimulated people's ideas. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you had things in there. I mean, basically, what is now a drone was in there in the 30s, and
that's really cool.
They had rocket ships in there when people had jetpacks, and they had two-way TV. But it's basically what now is Google Chat or
right, and now 85 years later, it's coming to fruition. I got it. Yeah.
And now it's all becoming real. And I think, and that's part of what I'm doing with DARPA, is I think that fiction creates reality. And there are far worse things to do to have fictions based on something, not just fictions based on nothing. So it kind of is a speculative future. So I'd love to do it that way.
So a mind like yours, continuing to work with DARPA, the Defense Department, with Niantic, and you're continuing your work with Ingress, and also developing the Harry Potter game that you really can't tell us about.
Right, I can't tell you about.
And I know you probably have 10 or 20 other projects.
We have a bunch of other projects I can't talk about.
I can't. That you can't. Can you talk about anything? How about your tennis game? Can you tell me a little bit about
tennis game sucks. Okay,
who usually wins, you or John?
Well, first of all, we haven't kept score in about 10 years. The answer is John almost always. I remember there were a couple, like I would usually win on holidays, like
holidays.
Monday holidays. I don't know why, but I'd always
stressful weekend probably for John.
I don't know, John. Those were the days that really. But what happened? It was kind of funny. Is what happened is for a while my shoulder. I was having a shoulder problem, so we just decided not to serve, and then it got worse, and so I started playing left-handed, and it really wasn't a lot worse left-handed than right-handed.
Look, let me be clear. A lot of times I drive by the tennis court, and these two are just sitting on a park bench
we're
talking,
sitting on we
solving
are
the world's
sitting on
problems.
the park bench. Exactly. No, I mean, okay, the amount of money you've saved on therapy, and with John and I talking in the morning, and we'll sit there for an hour.
If you give him good advice,
and just talk about stuff. I don't think I give them advice. It's really just, it's just really kind of listening and talking about whatever we feel like talking about. It's great.
All right, so you're
an
esteemed tennis player. You're an esteemed tennis player.
But we modded tennis, and we just started to change the rules. So it's like any other game.
Pickleball.
And you don't have to play it. When you're in your elderly years, quite the way you played it when you're 18, or that's going to be frustrating.
Where do you see the future of what you're doing with geo-mobile games?
It's
just the beginning?
I mean, I think, if I have anything to say about it, just all life's going to be a game. I was talking a long time
I like that.
Well, life is a game. It's
life
just most of it's badly
game.
designed. I mean, paying taxes is a game. It's just a really
Can we get
badly
out of that
designed
one?
game that sucks. Yeah, well, you can improve it. I think education, when you were talking about people in the last segment, talking about people sitting in rooms, if you modded education like it was, World of Warcraft or something, it would be a lot more, because you craft, you don't advance linearly, you have to learn all the skills. It'd be a whole lot better, and I don't think people should ever stop going to school.
No, but I also, as I said earlier, I think school can be very difficult because you have to fit into a one-room schoolhouse, I like to call it. And if you're out of the box just a little bit, it becomes difficult until you go to college.
Well,
and hopefully you can pick your lane and then study what you want. But
I mean, I was probably had ADD, was dyslexic, and had mixed dominance, which means your brain doesn't quite work right. And I was and they wanted to put me on Ritalin. This is back in the 60s.
But see, by not doing that, look at how much you've created.
By not doing
I believe
that,
a creative mind. That's kind of why I wanted you on.
Well,
and I let you go.
It also had parents. I had parents that were willing to go on this really strange journey, and find special teachers and stuff like that. And I would argue that all of the software I had to write to be able to function like a normal person, because I couldn't function like a real person. I mean, I was always really, oddly enough, great at games, which is probably why I did that, but they never thought they could teach me how to really write or read or anything. But all that software is exactly what I do now. You had to write all these patches to make you function, and that's your biggest gift.
You found your lane, and you're one of the best at it in the world, which is really, really very interesting. And I'm really glad you came in, because behind your mind, it's such a creative, interesting, eclectic mind, and it's brilliant, really.
Yeah,
so I'm
kind
of
of
blame you. I really appreciate you coming in and explaining a little bit of the mind behind some of the games that we play.
Yeah, I'll come back sometime. I'll be really focused. We'll find something. I'll just be really focused.
I think you were focused.
We'll see what
I think you did a great job. Anything else you'd like to add moving forward?
No, this is a lot of fun.
Yeah, you had a good time?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Yeah, I'll say good stuff at the tennis court when John and I are talking about it.
There you go. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming in. But
this
for anyone who's wanted to know, and I know that you make a big appearance at Comic-Con every year as well.
Yeah.
You're a huge draw. What you got there?
Oh, no, this is a book I picked up at the airport. I just didn't want to leave it on. This is Michael Connolly's Wrong Side of Goodbye.
I thought this was something, okay.
No.
Okay. But at Comic-Con, you make a big appearance as well. I mean, because I know you've got a massive following of people who follow Flint Dille and the mind of Flint Dille.
Different things. Because, I'm doing a book about stuff in the 80s, not because I really want to write an 80s memoir, but that was a really kind of golden age for creative stuff. A lot of stuff that's in movies and TV and really the whole world games now with stuff that was pioneered then. I'm sort of I want to go revisit it and figure out what was special about that era and why did it work.
Well, it was pre-computer age, really. Yeah. I mean, as we know it.
Well, it was just starting up. I mean, then you're like, it started.
A lot of stuff hand-drawn, if you will, right?
Yeah, it was hand-drawn, comics, games. It was all the computer stuff was just starting, but it was manageable then. You could unplug it.
Right,
it didn't follow you around, and three guys in a garage could do something amazing.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here.
I want that period back.
Thank you so much
well,
for
thanks
being
for having
here,
me.
And we're going to keep track of all the stuff that you're working on if you can, because he's working on so much. I just really appreciate you being here. I've always found this fascinating and interesting and just brilliant.
I mean, you got to tell them that, like in real life, I don't like ramble on this badly. I mean, we talk about real stuff. We're usually watching real shows and stuff like that.
Yeah, you usually bring over a pizza.
Yeah, usually bring over a pizza, drop it on the floor.
You're usually watching Johnny Carson. It's my cue to get out of there.
John and I just love watching old Johnny Carson episodes.
I know, I'm sick of Johnny Carson. In my house, like as soon as it's on, I just turn it off and I'm like,
it's right back to childhood. Yeah.
Anyway, thank you so much for being here, and we'll have you back. And I appreciate it. I hope you win your next tennis game. Anyway, everybody, thanks for being here. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio app. And of course, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and anywhere else that you like to get your podcast. Anyway, thank you, and we'll see you next time.